Sweet sound the Maryland dippily, heavily velvet and back up be belted. Sweet sound the Maryland dippily, heavily velvet and back up be belted. Bobby, she was prettier than Venus. She was so beautiful. Sweet sound the Maryland dippily, heavily velvet and back up be belted. Sweet sound the Maryland dippily, heavily velvet and back up be belted. She was love. 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 She was love.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Learned Council. Learned Council is a great television program with beautiful hosts and extraordinary guests. My name is Sharon Boy, and I'm pleased to welcome our host for today, Michelle Abu. I promise you an informative and exciting interview. So join me as I welcome Michelle. Hello, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm good. What about you?
I'm fine, thank you. You look stunning.
Thank you. You also do the same.
Okay, so what do you do, Michelle?
I'm a member of the Roses Ushering Agency and also a student at the University of Ghana.
Okay, so I hear you're interviewing distinguished fellow Nana Oppong on one of his books.
Yes, please, I am.
Okay, so which of his books, if I may ask?
So today I'll be interviewing him on law as the help of corruption and the underdevelopment of nations.
So why did you choose that book for your interview?
I know at the mention of the title you were wild, and so was I, so I decided to discover why he chose that title and what triggered him to study into that, or what triggered him to come up with the idea that it is the law that helps corruption, whilst we know it is otherwise.
Okay, that sounds nice. I'm looking forward to watching your interview and I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Okay, viewers, it's time for the program. Welcome once again to Learned Council. Thank you.
She was love.
Welcome to the Learned Council show. I am Michelle, and today I'm privileged to interview one man who we all know to be a lawyer by profession and maybe passion. He is in the person of distinguished fellow Nana Oppong, and today I'll be interviewing him on his book, Law as the Helper of Corruption and the Underdevelopment of Nations. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
So today the interview will be based on your book, Law as the Helper of Corruption and the Underdevelopment of Nations.
All right.
So, sir, we all know you to be a lawyer by profession, but surprisingly, I discovered that you are not only a lawyer, but also a physicist, a biologist, an economist. What drives you to attain all these heights? What keeps the fire burning?
What keeps the fire burning?
Yeah.
The fire is a lot. That's why it keeps going. Yes, so first of all, I had the opportunity to learn a lot when I was a child. I used to go into the library and I was so hungry for knowledge. I'll gather all the books, try to read them all, but I won't be able to read them before close of the night. And I was always sad when I couldn't finish the books. So I learned so many different fields: philosophy, logic, education, physics, biology, law, and so on and so forth. But when you know a lot, it simplifies life for you. You understand patterns and things that are true across board. So knowing a lot has helped me to be humble, and at the same time, it's made my life easier. And I also appreciate life, God, reality more because I know more.
So, sir, as you said, when you were young, you learned on the various fields. So why did you choose to major in law? Why law? Why not biology? Why not physics? Why law?
So the dean of my school at the University of Toronto came to me and said, "You're a very smart kid. Why don't you apply to go to law school?" And I said, "Law school?" I was ignorant about law school. He bought the forms for me. We filled the application. I wrote the LSAT, and the rest is history. So it just happened that I became a lawyer. But it has been very interesting for me to be a lawyer because I understand now law runs everything. And if you don't understand law, you won't understand reality.
Okay, so you're saying that you became a lawyer through your dean's motivation.
Yes.
Okay, so sir, today the interview is centered on your book, Law as the Helper of Corruption and the Underdevelopment of Nations.
Yes.
The title triggers a lot of questions. Why do you say law is the helper of corruption? We all know that the entire legal system exists to curb all these. So why are you saying otherwise? Why the irony?
Right, it's interesting that the law is a double-edged sword. You need law to prevent chaos. You need law for reward rewards and sanctions, for responsibilities, for clarity, for peace, for everything, for development. At the same time, that law is the creator of the opportunities, the creator of the powers, the situations and the justifications that allow one or few people to have enough power to be able to take that which belongs to the public, to the community, and to keep for themselves, and to justify it under law, and therefore to be immune from prosecution or even from blame. So law helps us. We need law. We can't live without law. But if you're not very careful, the same law creates the monster. It's the law that creates dictatorship. It's the law that creates all these people with so much power, they become almost godlike. So yes, law is necessary. But if you're not very careful, law becomes the evil.
Okay, so you are saying law becomes the evil if we are not very careful.
Right.
So there's a condition there.
Right.
So in that case, what do you recommend as a solution to corruption, since the law that is supposed to curb it is aiding it?
So we have to ask ourselves, how does law create, support, enable corruption? And you find that there are ways in which it does lay down rules and paths and systems and axioms and procedures and practices that enable a few people to have power. The way to prevent corruption is to prevent people having the opportunity and the justifications for privatization of public goods. So that means don't give people the power to decide, the power to justify, and so on and so forth. If we sit down carefully, we can prevent corruption.
So, sir, you see, in a country like Ghana, for instance, we know it is the responsibility of the president to appoint someone like the Chief Justice. Isn't this a way, is this a way that promotes corruption? Because there is this high possibility that the president would appoint someone he likes, other than someone who is competent or more qualified. So in this type of situation, how do you think we can solve this as a country?
Well, in the first place, when you want to talk about corruption, you don't want to limit it to a particular nation or a particular regime, because then that limits your ability to discuss fairly, because it could be political discussion. I don't want to get into political discussions. But there's nothing wrong with a president liking someone. We all choose the people that we like. It's a universal thing. The only thing to make sure is the person appointed is appointed to the office, and the person is qualified, as you say, competent to do the work, and the person does the work passionately and patriotically. So that means we have to set up systems, even if the president chooses someone he likes, even if it's his son or his daughter, then that person should be competent, and that person should do the work in accordance with the Constitution. So that's not just the president's work. It's a system that we set up in place to ensure that's what we call checks and balances, clarity, transparency, truthfulness, goodwill, and so on. Okay. So yes, it's not about one person deciding to choose another person. It's the systems that make sure that the person chosen is the right person and performs well. We can do it. So far, all we've been doing is using the old system. The old system is inefficient and is corrupting what we inherited from the colonialists. Inefficient, corrupting. We haven't done much to change that. So unless we sit down and carefully think about how we can navigate new systems, new rules, new practices, new procedures, what we're doing is just wasting time saying we're fighting corruption. We're not really fighting corruption. We're talking about fighting corruption. Talking about it is different from actually effectively doing something about it.
Okay, so you are saying in order for all this to take place, there should be some things like standard operating procedures and all that. And with the issue about the old system and we trying to change it, don't you think our leaders are not making an attempt to change it because it is favoring them?
I don't know if we can say our leaders are not making an attempt to change, because I see they're passing all the right laws, creating all the right offices. And I think at some level, in law, there is no presumption of insincerity. There's no presumption of fraud. You cannot assume that somebody is not doing intentionally what he's supposed to do, good faith and so on. So let's assume they have good intentions. Let's assume that they want the best for the country, and I have no reason to doubt that. But still, they're using the law in an old way to solve the problem created by the old law. So it doesn't work, won't work. What we need, see what happens when you have an old way of treating a disease and it hasn't worked, and you go back using the same system, you waste your time. You need new systems, new inventions, new discoveries. Yeah. So what laws do we have to create to ensure that one person, a group of people, do not take our national resources and privatize them and become so powerful there's nothing we can do about it? That's dialogue, that's openness, that's intelligence, that's consulting. So we can't just pass laws. Wishful thinking. Say, oh, we have an office, we have a prosecutor, we have systems to catch criminals. The criminals are not criminal by nature. They become so-called criminal by opportunity. So let's take away the opportunities, and there'll be no criminals.
Okay. They become criminals by opportunity, you see. And an example of these opportunities can be high unemployment in the country. So it's all boils down to our leaders solving the major problems in the country.
Yes.
Sir, in the introductory part of your book, you say the law can brand and justify corrupt as legal. Why do you say so?
All right, so a person is given the opportunity to, say, create roads, and he's in charge of roads. He has a budget for it. He determines who gets hired to do the roads and who checks and therefore certifies the roads as complete, the quality and inspection and so on. Then he awards the contract, pays out the money through his cabinet or assistants or directors or a system of public procurement and so on. But in the end, a few people determine how much money to go out, how it is going to be spent, how it is justified and so on. If the person is good, sincere, patriotic, all the money goes to the project. If the person is not sincere, not patriotic, some of the money, maybe half, maybe less, maybe more, we know, but goes in this pocket. And then he can justify that, or she can justify that by going to legal procedures and systems that say, yeah, what you did is right, checklist. I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And then when he does that or she does that, it's not corrupt. The law allows them to do it. And then if you take them to court, you find nothing wrong. You can see they're very rich. They were not rich before they took the position, and they become very rich afterwards. But you can't say that they were corrupt because they have the right to use their intelligence to enjoy the fruits of their labor. And if the law gives them that fruit by following procedures and doing it correctly, there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay. So you said we are following the old systems. And you know, currently, before a bill is passed into law, it goes through 11 good stages. It passes through the Council of State. It even goes through the President. It means in the old system, that's how it works. How come they don't notice that this type of bill, before it is passed as law, don't they notice that it's corruptible, it can be easily misunderstood or misinterpreted?
Okay, so it's not the number of procedures and steps and procedures. So if the first one is wrong, then if you pass it along 100 times, it's still wrong, right? So it's not the number of people or procedures and things. So it is rather, if you're doing calculations in math or in physics or anything in science, if you get the first formula wrong, then the next steps will all be wrong.
Yes.
And what's happening is the decision makers are often victims of the laws that they create. First of all, the system, the foundation of the legal system that creates corruption is there. And they're operating within that system. So they're starting with a corruptible foundation.
Okay.
And along the way, human beings are not perfect. So you have desires, fractionalism, people thinking of their own needs, all kinds of problems that happen, pressures on them. So when they decide, they're deciding on a corruptible foundation using corruptible maxims and procedures, which can be corrupted by very smart people in charge.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so sir, I also came across this line, authority is legality. Interesting. So does this mean that any rule that emanates from someone in the high authority automatically is deemed legal?
If the authority is final authority, then what the final authority says in law is legal. So it means that if the authority says this is black, it is black for the purpose of the law.
Wow.
So it depends on how much authority you have. So if I'm in charge of an investigation, I'm the final authority, I can say, having examined the facts and allegations, I have determined that there's nothing to investigate. Case closed. And because I'm the final authority, case closed. It happens that when the person is not the final authority and there is a contrary authority, then there could be a problem. But when there's no contrary authority, even if there is a superior authority, the minor authority's decision could be affirmed by the higher authority. So it's not a question of authorities and law. It's a question of who is in charge. What is their motivation? What is their passion? What are the controls? What are they afraid of? If people have absolute power, then they can do corruption absolutely. And it often happens in dictatorships. And dictatorships are not the people who actually sit down and say, I'm a dictator. It could be a dictator in an office, in a company, in a ministry, in a government, in a nation, within a block. And so everything that happens in the world depends on the power and authority of the person doing it and the quality of their care for the nation. If there's no duty of care, they don't care about the nation, then they care about themselves and they take national resources and use it for themselves. But I'm telling you that it is the law that creates the opportunity and the justification for that. So if you want to stop that, we have to look at the law.
Okay, so if you want to stop that, we have to look at the law. We have to work with a new system. So, sir, with the issue of law helping corruption, is it to only a particular continent, let's say Africa, or the Western countries are also included? Their legal systems also help corruption, or it's limited to Africa? Because
no, they created a legal system, or at least their legal system is what we have now, which creates the foundations for corruption. So corruption is everywhere. Every nation has this problem of corruptibility and corruption, but the degrees of corruption. When you're very rich as a nation, the level of manifest corruption can be less. And also, of course, you can create systems, intelligent systems that lower corruption, that minimize corruption. But very poor countries, when the leaders get into corruption, it becomes a sweet product. They become addicted to it. And the reason is there's insecurity. There's problems of communities, a breakdown in society. So when you become powerful, you see corruption as a way, I'm not saying universally, don't quote me wrong, I'm just saying many people see corruption as a way of security, securing their lives, their families' lives, and the future. So if they have access to $1 million and they can use much of it to protect themselves legally, it will make sense logically that somebody in power will use the money for himself. Because why shouldn't he for himself? It looks like he'll be foolish if he has access to resources. There's nothing stopping him from benefiting personally. He uses it. So in poor countries, what I'm trying to tell you is corruption is a bigger problem because of the issues of the environment, the culture, the breakdown in systems and community, and also because the laws are not powerful enough to prevent and to protect against corruption.
so we need more powerful laws because of our societal structures. That's what you're
And
saying.
our underlying powerful to mean intelligent laws. Laws that target prevention, that see this is the way to corruption in this area. Let's seal the holes. This is the way to prevention corruption here. Let's prevent it from here. So we sit down in contracting, in education, in awarding things, and that, and that, and that. And when we do that, then we can go farther. Unless we sit down and actually prevent corruption, prosecution of corruption won't solve the problem.
Okay. So, sir, we know that with rule of law, in order for rule of law to operate, or there should be rule of law, there should be the existence of rule of law, there has to be a transparent legal system. And with you saying that the law aids corruption means our legal system is not transparent, does that mean we have a problem with rule of law?
No, there's no problem with rule of law. I've just told you that you need law to prevent chaos. You need law to award sanctions and rewards and responsibility. So you can't escape law. So the rule of law is always necessary. But what type of rule of law? Because even in dictatorship, they have rule of law. Even the devil has laws, right?
Yes.
So just because you have laws doesn't guarantee that you have good outcome. As I said, even the devil has laws. What we need to figure out then, and we have a transparent legal system, it's just that transparency at some level becomes useless because if you're not very intelligent as a lawyer or a legal scholar, how would you understand the complicated language and obtuse ways of interpreting law that happens every day in courts and legal systems? So transparency is not enough. Complexity is the game, but complexity by good people, bound by goodwill, duty of care, fear of God, intelligent system of prevention, that one is what will help us.
Okay. So we know that from what you said, there is rule of law in existence, but then just that there are some complexities and all that. Viewers, with this, we'll go for a short commercial break, and after we'll continue, and you get to know more interesting things about the book, Law as the Helper of Corruption, and the Underdevelopment of Nations. Thank you.
Only Maryland Dippily heavily ever Bobby. velvet and back up baby bells. She was love. She was love. She was love. She was love. She was love.
Yeah, welcome back to the Learned Counsel Show. I know by now you are eager to know what our distinguished fellow has in stock for us, because from the beginning we've learned a lot. So we'll continue. Sir, we know that in your book you say that the law is supposed to be the speaker of the truth. So why then do we hear of people saying otherwise, people saying things contrary to the law, but then they are able to justify it and automatically it's accepted?
So right now, the law has become the dictates of authority. You can simplify law now as what authority says. And the final law is what the final authority says. If you equate law with final authority, then you can see why whoever is in charge, whoever is authority, then determines what is right and wrong, what is corrupt, what is not corrupt, what is good, what is bad. In the past, the final authority used to be God, so that the prophet will come and says, "That says the Lord," and everybody listens or doesn't listen. But God was authority. Then we replace the authority with the kings and queens, the monarchs, and then we replace them with parliaments and so on, assemblies and senates and so on. But right now, in the end, only a few men have final authority. For example, the Constitutional Republic of Ghana and the United States of America and everywhere says the Supreme Court shall be the court of final authority. So the few men and women forming the Supreme Court are the final authority in any country, not just in Ghana, all over the world. If they're good people, then you have good final authority. If there are bad people, what do they have?
You have a bad final authority.
Correct.
That's so unfortunate. Okay, sir, and also the issues discussed in your books are very, very deep. But then, you know, as humans, people will always find a problem somewhere. Not everybody will share in this thought. So what do you do to get the issues discussed go across a lot of people to access it? What do you do as the author behind it? What are the steps you take to make sure that in as much as more people will not buy, in as much as there will be people who will not buy into my ideas, definitely there's someone out there who shares the same thoughts as I do. So how do I make sure that my issues get across to them?
All right, so I approach law, the issue of law, in a scientific manner. I'm not the person who just writes for the sake of writing, or it's not just my opinion. So I put concepts that enable corruption, procedures that enable corruption, authorities that enable corruption. So these are scientifically falsifiable propositions. So I'm not interested in the people who say we're not interested or we don't agree. It's not a question you agree or you don't agree. Come and see what I'm saying makes sense or not. And let lawyers and learned people come together and analyze whether what I'm saying makes sense or not. It's like scientific proposition. You say 1 + 1 is, let people challenge it or face it or demolish it. If we come together, smart people come together and they analyze our laws all over the world. I'm just talking about Ghana because I am a Western trained lawyer. I'm not just talking about Ghana law. I'm talking about American, European, Canadian, and so on. We'll begin to see a large problem, and the reason why we're not succeeding in fighting corruption is because the laws themselves are the fathers and the mothers of the corruption. We have to deal with that. So what concepts, what procedures, what discretion, what rules, what principles and maxims, what axioms of the law create corruption? Let's look at them. When we do, then we start solving the problem one by one. So we need conferences. Television is a good program. Workshops. Let's start. Classrooms, intellectuals, articles, debates. Then we will know that what I'm saying is true.
So we know that the book we are discussing today was written some years ago, a few years ago, which means it has been in existence for a while now.
Actually, I wrote it last year.
Last year, okay.
Yes.
So which means it has been in existence for almost a year now.
Yes.
What are the steps? Have there been any changes since you came up with the book?
No,
Or
it's the same thing. And nothing is going to change in corruption unless we tackle the law. It's not the people who are being corrupt, who are evil people, that we have to attack and take money from them or put them in jail. That's a very inefficient, slow-minded way of solving the corruption problem. What we have to do is to prevent it. And we cannot prevent it when we're giving people power to take the justification for immunity. And then we do nothing and we sit down and say we're trying to catch corrupt people. They are not corrupt if they follow the law and enrich themselves. Because we have many axioms in the law. For example, the law says you have a right to be wise. And you have a right to be foolish. And wise people have the right to exploit the foolish as long as they do so legally. So if you're smart and you have power, authority, access to resources, and you can justify taking it, why not? So if this is a system we operate in, then why are you blaming people for enriching themselves when they have power and authority and the law allows them to do that? So you have to change that system that rewards you for being smart, that rewards you for justifying what you're doing. After all, everything that we do in the world is about justification.
Yes.
I call it sense making. Does it make sense? If it makes sense according to the law, then you're protected. So only foolish people have access to resources and remain poor.
Okay.
Smart people will find a way to enrich themselves. And when they do so legally, you can see it as corruption, but the person will see it as being smart. Being smart, which is another way of saying some people are corrupt, when it's legal, there's nothing you can do about it.
So we have to change the system that allows people to justify their smart, in quotes, actions.
Correct.
We have to change it to what? What is the alternative? What are we changing the system to?
So we have to create a system where everything, you use the word transparency.
Yes.
Everything is transparent and random
Okay.
and universal. If authority cannot use their discretion to benefit someone, exclusion of someone unlawfully or wrongly, then authority will act right.
Okay.
When things are in the open, when a variety of people, in this country, Muslim, Christian, NDC, MPP, CPP, women, men, old, young, rich, and poor, come together and have equal rights to decide, that decision is more likely to be just than if only one segment decides. You understand?
Yes.
So inclusivity, multiplicity of people coming together, a variety of people, opposite sides coming, adversaries coming together. Transparency means systems that do not favor one party, one person, one authority. Things that are not done in secret. Things that can be challenged freely. Freedom, justice. These are not just words. They are actionable propositions that should be put into practice. So what does it mean? How do we make sure that the few people who have authority don't abuse that authority? How do we make sure the people with the money use it for ourselves? And how can we not challenge people who do shoddy work? Why are we so silent? When the contractor does the wrong thing and we just close us, oh, wrong contractor, corruption. Why can't we do that? So what happens to citizens' power? The public guardian, the trustee. What happens to the street person having the opportunity to challenge what somebody has done in their neighborhood? Why can neighborhoods have power? Villages, towns, districts. Why does everything have to go up? And then up, we don't hear anything at all. So there are ways in which we can do
So
this
we
stuff.
start from the grassroots.
It's not even, if the grassroots are ignorant, the grassroots are corruptible, then nothing works at the grassroots. So what we need is, we start with a discussion. Let competent people of good faith, competent people who fear God, come together, examine the system, see what is wrong with it. It's like a patient. You do the diagnosis. This is wrong with our legal system. And then starts, how do we proceed? Which is the first one, the second one, the following one. Then, when everything we know, the steps and the procedures which are correct, then it will trickle down, or at least you get the grassroots to come. The grassroots, being ignorant of law, cannot be in charge of legal reform. Legal reform must start with learned people who have passion and goodwill for the country.
So, sir, ever since you wrote this book, have you received any form of criticisms, maybe both constructive and the ones that are not constructive? Any form of feedback on how this book has been helpful or how this book has been harmful? Have you received any of such?
I've received feedback, a lot of feedback, and most of it has been positive. But I'm not interested in the feedback as much as that I want us to start a process of trying to do something about it. Someone said the philosophers have come into the world and they've done a lot of talking, but what we need to do is change the world. Do you understand?
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about corruption and they say, oh, yeah, lawyer, doctor, I understand. But what we need to do is start a process. You know, they say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with this. Start a process that would enable us to start tackling the illness of the law, the sickness of the law, the evil of the law. And we haven't done that yet. And people are just talking and going through the motions, the old way, the old system. So I hope and I look forward to the day when universities, parliaments, governments, NGOs, civil society organizations, ordinary people will start talking about how we can reform this law, that law, how this law, that law is not helping. And then that's the day when I'll be very happy. Not the day when people are talking about my book. We should move beyond my book and deal with the problem.
How we can reform this law, that law. That means that not the entire legal system is corruptible. There are specific laws, rights.
Right now, we don't know yet, but what we see is that the law is corruptible, and it's the law that is allowing people to be corrupt. Without the law, how can one person, a group of people, take the resources of the nation? They can't. It's the law that is enabling that to happen.
The second part of the title, law as the help of corruption and the underdevelopment of nation. How does law help the underdevelopment of nations?
Right. So when the law helps create corruption, then the resources which are supposed to be used for projects get diverted into private hands. They don't get used for the purposes. Bad quality roads, infrastructure, stealing of public resources, all the things that could be used, that the money could be used for, are not used for that purpose. So there is underdeveloped. Incompetent people get into positions of power. Incompetent people get projects and they execute projects poorly. You find roads which are supposed to be new, really going nowhere after just a couple of years. Medicines being wrong medicines, fake standards, not applied, and so on. So when you have a corrupt nation, you have incompetence in the way of running the business of the nation. You have wickedness in terms of how people are being treated. You have diversity, but the diversity, it doesn't work because you have a few people just taking the reason for themselves. So justice doesn't work, freedom doesn't work, or it works much less than it's supposed to. So it leads to underdevelopment of that nation.
So how do we grow to the stage where we no longer interpret law based on authority so that all these problems can be curbed?
No, we have to interpret law based on authority. But the nature of the authority is what we have to reform to ensure that authority is reflective of justice, of truth, and of the goodwill and the welfare of the nation. Authority should not be based on fiat or on strength or threats or fear or evil ways or money or a select class of people. Do you understand?
Yes.
When God was accepted as authority of law, his laws reflected, that authority reflected the goodwill of everybody. That says the Lord. But now, that says money. Now, that says the party. Now, that says the tribe. And that is what we have to overcome.
Okay. So we also say that for every law, there is a counter law. For every provision, there is a counter provision. So does this mean that in as much as there are corruptible laws, there should be counter laws for that one?
So just think about it logically. If there are for every law a counter law, it means for good law, bad law, good law. So you are actually accepting the proposition that at least some part of the law is corruptible.
Yes.
And that's what we have to handle.
Okay, so some part of the law is corruptible, and that is what we have to handle. Viewers, by now, I'm sure you've learned a lot about our legal system and how, according to distinguished fellow Nana Oppong, the law helps corruption. And I believe most of you by now understand why he is of that view. On this note, we come to the end of this interview. Doc, it was very nice having you. Thank you for enlightening us. By now, I'm sure everybody has learned something. We shall meet again next week. Thank you.
Well, that was an exciting program. So I'm here with Michelle to interview a little. Michelle, that you did very great.
Thank you.
Okay, so what did you learn from the interview?
Okay, so I actually felt accomplished. I actually felt that all that I needed to know about it, I have gotten to know it. So I learned that the problem we have is that we are still practicing the old system. So in order to get better, we need to make some changes and adopt a new system that will help all of us well.
Okay, I hope you all learned something as well. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, be good, be wise. Bye.
Sweet sound the Maryland dippily heavily velvet and back up be belted. Sweet sound the Maryland dippily heavily velvet and back up be belted. Barbie, she was not, she was prettier than Venus. She was so beautiful. Sweetly soundly, merrily, dippily, happily, velvet, impeccably, be built. Sweetly soundly, merrily, dippily, happily, velvet, impeccably, be built.